Thank you. And if you guys have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we're going to try and leave some time at the end to do a Q&A. As Dave mentioned, my name is Christopher Irwin, Principal Consultant for Forsyte IT Solutions. Prior to founding Forsyte, I was a 10-year Microsoft veteran covering everything from access and identity management to Microsoft Azure. We're going to try and do very little slideware, although I do have some in here, and the vast majority of it will be demonstration. So let's go ahead and get the ball rolling here. So we're going to talk about Enterprise Mobility Suite today, or EMS as you may see it called. First and foremost, we live in a mobile-first, cloud-first world. These are all stats you guys are familiar with, particularly in the education space. These students are bringing in their own devices. Faculty, staff members are working off iPads today, et cetera. I mean, so the stats don't lie. This is from Forrester Research. 61% of workers, mix their personal work tasks on devices. So what's driving that change? We see this across the board, right? Whether it's employees, students, customers, business partners, there's a plethora of devices out there. There's even more applications that are being developed every single day, and the amount of data continues to grow and grow and grow, and to harness all that. And, unfortunately, from an IT standpoint, you're left trying to cover and deal with everything that's coming in, which in EDU specifically can be a challenge. Budgets are shrinking, while the amount of work is definitely not. Hopefully, we'll take a look at this and you'll see the value in EMS and come to understand some of the ways this can benefit your business, make your lives easier, as well as the life of your students, faculty, staff members. So the current reality is this. You've got stuff all over the place. You've got, you're using Dropbox, you're using Khan Academy, they've got some stuff up in Microsoft Azure, AWS, etc. All out in the cloud, all these various identities floating around. They're using multiple devices to manage this stuff. Some of them being managed devices that they have on premise. Maybe it's a school-issued laptop or a desktop, or maybe it's an iPad. You've got stuff on premise, you got stuff in the cloud. It's a mess. There's literally stuff everywhere. So how do we take care of that? From a Microsoft standpoint, we utilize what's called Enterprise Mobility Suite, or EMS. And really, what is EMS? EMS is a suite of products that are going to help you manage all facets of the mobile user. First and foremost is the hybrid identity. Hybrid identity is composed of a couple of different components. First and foremost is Azure Active Directory Premium. Second is going to be Microsoft Identity Manager, and third is going to be multi-factor authentication. This is going to be where you can do your self-service password reset, your account creation, deprovisioning, single sign-on, all of those things that we're striving to deliver today and struggling with. The hybrid identity components are going to help you take care of that. In addition to that, we've got mobile device management. This is a very familiar concept for a lot of people these days, for some of the reasons I just mentioned. That's going to be handled through Microsoft Entune. That helps you with your mobile device management, with your mobile application management, which a lot of vendors don't want to discuss today simply because they don't have capabilities around it, and we'll get into that a little more. Selective wipe, patch management, those type of things. Then we've got access and information protection delivered through Azure Rights Management Services. This is a type of IRM component. Most of the time we secure or we worry about securing data in transit, at rest, etc. But what happens when an authorized user takes that data and does something with it they're not supposed to? Azure Rights Management helps you protect against that. And then finally, we've got Advanced Threat Analytics. ATA is a new member to the EMS suite, and what ATA allows you to do at a high level is use machine learning to your advantage, model out access and use rights, etc., to your on-premise Active Directory, and then stop threats before they happen. We had an old saying when I was on the education team, and I'm sure this rings true to you guys. The hackers are already on your network in a lot of instances. You've got students that are in there doing things, and faculty members, etc. And so having a very secured lockdown environment is important in the education space, and ATA can help you with that. So some sobering stats. Microsoft is actively servicing 54 million authentications an hour. That's 1.29 billion a day. Microsoft feeds over 10 terabytes of authentication a day into Azure machine learning a day, deflects 1.5 million fraudulent login attempts a day, and they've got a complete digital crimes unit that's identifying over 30,000 compromised accounts and users a day. What does that mean to you, right? Other than just being some scary and large numbers. The old saying, you know, practice makes perfect. Microsoft is doing more of this type of work than anyone in the world. I mean, 1.29 billion logins a day is enormous. And so machine learning gets better the more data you feed into it, and Microsoft's feeding 10 terabytes a day in there. Machine learning on the Microsoft side, the advanced threat detection, etc., is growing exponentially better as the days go along, and it's just getting better and better. Real quick comparison, and I'm going to send these slides out for anyone that's interested after the fact. You can look down the list here. We're not going to read the whole thing because we want to jump into the demo as quick as possible. But the various MDM components that are out there, whether it's Exchange Active Sync, you know, this would be the feature set available. For those of you running Office 365, you've got the MDM for Office 365 component. Then you've got the Microsoft Intune Cloud-only component, and something we'll talk about briefly. For those of you ConfigMan users out there, there's integration between Configuration Manager and Intune that gives you even more flexibility and support, and that would be listed over here on the very far right-hand side. So let's talk real quick about comprehensive lifecycle management from an MDM standpoint. User comes in, they enroll into what Microsoft calls the company portal, and we're actually going to see this in the demonstration. They're going to get delivered custom terms and enrollment. You can do bulk enrollment for Apple devices with service accounts. You can restrict Exchange email, etc. Once that enrollment happens, then provisioning kicks off, and this is wholly dependent upon the profiles that you force down based on these users and groups. You can deploy certificates, you know, Wi-Fi profiles, VPNs, security policies, install mandatory apps, etc. Then you've got to manage and protect. So as we're provisioning out these profiles, we're also installing a management profile so that we can restrict access to corporate devices. We're putting policies on there to prevent jailbroken devices in the school, to protect data that doesn't need to be cut and paste between applications, to be able to report, etc. That's the typical beginning, right? And most folks have a handle on that. You've also got to be able to retire devices. What happens you know, when you lose a device, or, you know, teacher's in a coffee shop and leaves her laptop there and it's got student data on it. You got to be able to wipe that off, and you can do that selectively and remotely via Intune. You know, revoke access to corporate resources, etc. Now, I mentioned mobile account or application management a minute ago. Most folks are familiar with MDM, but not necessarily MAM or MAM. Microsoft has taken this concept of mobile application management a step further. So if we take a look at the MAM console, or at the MAM here, mobile application management, we've got a tablet device that has multiple apps on it. These would be end-user, consumer-based applications. The end-user brings this into your environment. Then you've got a set of managed apps that are intermingled with them. Those are going to be things like your Office applications, Skype, OneDrive, etc. Through them, and then these would be your consumer or personal applications. We put a soft container around the managed applications that allow you to control, in a traditional containerized model, the apps in the top section in the managed box up here would be completely unable to communicate with any of the personal applications. That may inhibit the use of the device, may cause all sorts of use issues. Microsoft's perspective is a little different, right? We want those to be able to work together in a smart fashion, and so Microsoft allows for multi-identity policy through the mobile application management. So a single application, take Word for example, can manage both corporate data and personal data. This allows the end user to be most efficient on the device, to not have to have completely separate tools for doing bits and pieces of work throughout the day, whether that's writing papers at school or using spreadsheets in an accounting class or something along those lines. And also allows you to push out managed browsers, managed PDF viewers, audio, video, etc. So here's an example. Email may come in, has a Excel file attached to it. In the email, I have the ability to copy the data in Excel and use it through various managed applications, but I am prohibited, based on the MAM policies, from pasting it to a personal application. Word, you know, maybe I can paste into Word, but I can't save it to my personal OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever the case is, right? So we get the ability to be very selective in what we're going to allow the data to actually do. And we can allow selective functions of corporate data or protected data with selective applications. It's not an all or nothing thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about MAM as we go through the presentation and the subsequent demo. RMS, we talked a little bit about Azure Rights Management. Azure Rights Management allows you to encrypt files and data. Essentially, it embeds in the file itself. You can protect virtually any file with it. You can share this with any person. You can view it on any device, and you can track and manage it through the cloud. So what you see here on the bottom left is the interface to protect the file. We've right-clicked. We've entered the RMS console to share the file out. It gives us the ability to enter users with email addresses that we want to allow to access this file, to set the permissions level, as we can see down here, viewer, reviewer, co-author, etc. Define when the content is going to expire, and get a notification if someone tries to access the document. The beauty of this is it's flexible, and it is embedded in the document, so it goes everywhere. So if you think you've got faculty members that have access to FERPA data, and you want to protect that, right? You don't want someone to walk off with that. Maybe they leave a thumb drive at Starbucks or something. If that file is not protected with something like RMS, they can plug that thumb drive into any laptop and access the data. The beauty of RMS is because the certificate is actually embedded in the document. When a user tries to open that document, it's going to validate the credentials against Azure Active Directory. And we'll be able to revoke access or prevent that unauthorized user from accessing that data. In addition to that, we have the ability to take advantage of the cloud-based reporting, and I can track it. I can see who's opened it, who was denied, how long it's been out there, where they've opened it from. It gives you a lot of flexibility and control over the documents in your environment. And finally, we're going to talk about advanced threat analytics. So ATA, or Advanced Threat Analytics, is that on-premise component that's going to allow you to identify security attacks before they can cause significant damage. It's real similar to what credit card companies do, right? And we're all familiar with this. Credit card companies track your typical usage patterns, and you know, if I jump on a plane today and fly to Rome and start using my credit card, they're going to question that, right? Because I don't typically make charges from there. Very, very similar concept. So what's going to happen in ATA is it's going to provide you with behavioral analytics, detection for known threats and attacks, and then advanced threat detection. So those two will combine, and they'll give you a very comprehensive solution to detect threats before they actually get away from you. And in most cases, if you think like the Sony attacks or Home Depot or Target, you know, users were able to compromise accounts and were in that environment for a significant amount of time. ATA will help track that down and prevent that from happening. And so let's take a real quick look at how it works, and then we're going to jump into a demo. So first and foremost, you're going to install an ATA server. It's completely non-intrusive. You do port mirroring for your domain controller, so all related traffic gets sent over. It's completely invisible to attackers. Any of your SIM stuff will go over as well. And it's going to start from day one collecting relevant information out of Active Directory and SIM, titles, group memberships, etc. It's going to be able from day one to identify spear phishing attacks, man in the middle, ticket granting, etc. But it's also going to learn. It's going to start learning and profiling entity behavior, those are your users, groups, etc. And it's going to identify normal behavior for those users, as well as be able to alert on anomalous behavior for those users. We'll be able to go through and track that and raise those red flags whenever something happens. It's comparing everything across the board. If a user goes and tries to log in from a remote location, or tries to, you know, do a remote execution and they're not allowed to or don't typically do that, an alert will be raised. You'll be able to go through, and you can see the console over here on the right-hand side. You'll be able to see who it was, what group it was, whether they were in violation of a policy, etc., IP address, the whole 9 yards, and go through and actually track that down, identify the issue, and neutralize them as soon as possible. We're going to talk briefly about MIM. MIM is a Microsoft Identity Manager. This is the predecessor, or the new solution. If you guys are familiar with Forefront Identity Manager 2010 and ILM previous to that, we'll look at that briefly today. I wanted to show you this slide because the hybrid identity with MIM is essentially what we have in place in this demo. We have an on-premise Active Directory, we have Microsoft Identity Manager, we have Azure AD Connect. We're utilizing our on-premise Active Directory as well as our Azure Active Directory, and we've got it all tied together with a nice neat bow. And we're going to take a look at that today. And then finally, I wanted to talk to you real quick about FastTrack deployment offer. Dave can speak more specifically to this at the end of the session, but FastTrack is a funding opportunity offered by Microsoft. It gives you $15 per seat of EMS for the first 1,000 users plus $5 per seat after for up to $60,000. What we're seeing across the board, and we're doing a lot of EMS deployments today at Forsyte, a bulk of our customers are getting the entire project funded, taking advantage of this product or this solution. So 150 seat minimum, it's got to be qualifying workloads, all of which we're going to talk through today. Sign us so, Microsoft approves it, and we can most likely put this in place for you for free. So let's go ahead and I'm going to end the slideshow, and we're going to jump right in and start doing our demo. So this is my MIM box over here. I've got a real simple HR application here. We're going to go ahead and create a user out of the audience here. And hit go. Now what's going to happen, this is a very simple application, much simpler than most of your SISs, but the concept is the same. We're entering a user into a database. This could be your student information system, this could be your ERP, your HR, or any other system that you have on premise essentially. That's going to kick off this entire process. That is the only interaction that I actually have to do to make this work, and we'll see as we go through. Now while we're waiting for this to kick off, I want to show you the MIM interface real quick. So this is the Microsoft Identity Manager. This is a component that is part of the EMS suite and comes fully licensed with it. This is your on-premise identity management solution. MIM is the component that's going to pull accounts out of your SIS, pull accounts out of your ERP, create them in the down-level directories and databases for you, put them in the correct groups, and manage updates going forward. You know, when a student changes from one school to the next, or they go from 8th grade to 9th grade, MIM will put them in the correct security groups for you, will remove permissions, change various attributes and systems for you. If a woman gets married and her last name changes, MIM can handle that downstream attribute flow for you across the board. So we're going to take a look real quick. I'm obviously an administrator. This is what the administrative interface looks like. I want to point out a couple of things, and then we're going to dig into the next. I don't want to spend too much time specifically on MIM, but if you guys are interested in it, please feel free to let me know. MIM is near and dear to my heart, and I'd love to have an in-depth conversation. As we can see, I've got multiple synchronization rules in place here. Let's take a look at one of these sync rules. MIM does have the ability for you to write code if you need to, but the concept is that 85% or so of logic that you need to do can be done wholly through this interface without having to write any customizations. We can see quickly and easily this is an inbound interface, or sort of inbound data. We can see, you know, this is the object that I'm dealing with in my metaverse. This is the external system, and these are person objects. I can quickly see, okay, I'm creating resources in my FIM portal, which is what you see behind me, and these are grayed out because this is an inbound, but if it was an outbound and I wanted to provision into this system, I'd simply click the checkbox. And then we can look at our inbound data flows. Very, very simple. I'm just doing basic building on the fly here. In this particular case, I'm using a trim function, trimming the first name data that comes in, putting a dot in the middle, trimming the last name, and then appending a static domain to it. So I'm building an email address on the fly here using variables, and that'll work across the board with all of my users. Something else I want to point out here, some of the functionality. So we obviously get the attributes that are available. I also get the ability to do constants and strings, as well as custom expressions. So I can write pseudocode here without having to do any compiling, or I can use a list of built-in functions depending on what my needs are. if statements, and ors, etc. So pretty feature-rich from that standpoint without having to write any code. If you've got a very, very in-depth function, you can absolutely write code for that. I want to show you one of my favorite things about MIM and what most folks get a lot of use out of, and that's the dynamic group management. And then we'll dig into some of the other features. One second here. Let's move this out of the way. We're going to get over to that in just a second. These are security groups that I've created. We can look down the list here and see, various information. They're universal groups. I don't have any emails tied to them, although we could. And I've got various security groups here. We're going to look specifically at my high school students because I got a fairly good query here. Very, very simple to create. I've got 3 different options from a member selection standpoint. These could be manually managed, meaning someone manually curates the membership list. One of the reasons you may want to do that through MIM is the ability to tie workflows around it and approvals. So now you can delegate out ownership of a security group or a distribution list to faculty members or staff members without giving them access to Active Directory. And you can tie workflows around it so that certain groups require approval, whereas others don't. Maybe you've got a help desk group for a local high school or a college. When a member or when a user requests access to that, it fires off an email and somebody has to approve it before they get that membership. Every bit of that can be done through MIM, and it's wholly tracked and auditable. In addition to that, and really the meat of it, are these criteria-based groups here. This allows me to build a query based off of information in the system and dynamically calculate the membership list. So in this particular case, I'm looking at user objects, and I'm saying it has to match all the following criteria. My employee type equals student, right, and any of these 3. So I have to be a student, and I have to be in grade 9, 10, 11, or 12. If I meet that criteria, I will automatically be put in this group. Now think of the implications there. When we start looking at these attributes, this is every single attribute in my system. And I can aggregate up data from various systems. I can pull information out of your student information system, out of your class management system, out of your Active Directory, or anything else you've got. And you can build these queries on it. What we see a lot of schools do, because particularly in education, especially in K-12, there's a ton of churn. There are students coming in and moving throughout the districts all the time, this in colleges as well. They come in as a committed student and they leave and then they come back, and staff is just overwhelmed trying to manage that. This is a very, very good way to handle that dynamic group management, build the query out, and let the system do the work for you. So we can see these are the users that meet that criteria. So that's all we're going to dig into from a MIM standpoint today. We're going to run out of time if I sit here and talk forever about MIM. So let's look at some of the other stuff in the demo. So as you can see, this is my demo users account, or my demo users OU. We go through here and do a refresh. We can see the account for Andra was created. Wasn't there before, happened through the system. I can dig in and look at her and see it used the rule set that I had set forth in them, built the email address just like the format we looked at, populated some other information for her dynamically based on that system. Something else I want you to notice, if we look at these groups here, I'm using dynamic group management and automatically making Andra a member of these groups. Now this is important because this is going to drive all of the behavior that we see going forward. Access to SaaS applications, permissions, etc. will all be driven based off of these group memberships. Next, we're going to pop up my Azure Active Directory subscription here. This is through the Office 365 portal. For those of you that don't know, Azure Active Directory is the back end for Office 365. So we're actually reading and writing to Azure Active Directory, and then that's surfaced up through Office 365. Right here at the top, Andra's account was synchronized in from Active Directory, so that happened through our Azure Active Directory Connect server. And one thing I want you to notice here, when we start looking at Andra's account, it's automatically been licensed. So we're doing this in a dynamic fashion, so there's no end user or no administrative action required for this. These are based on policies on the role and the group that we put Andra in. We have configured she's getting an E3 license and an EMS license, so we can demo EMS for you. So let's go ahead and fire up browser here. Something else I want you to notice, and this is particularly important in education. Throughout the demo, I don't use IE or Edge, although they work great, and those are typically the browsers I would use. I use third-party browsers a lot, specifically for you guys, because I want to show you, we're not specific, or it's browser agnostic. Something else I want to point out for those of you that use Office 365 today, I'm not going to the standard portal. We're using what's called a vanity URL. It's something that we do a lot here at Forsyte. We've got a service that allows you to do that, and essentially it bypasses the need to go to Office or portal.office.com and go through Homeroom Discovery. It does all of that stuff for you. It takes you directly to the ADFS page where you're going to sign in at. So we're going to go ahead and sign into Andra's account. First thing we notice, I'm being prompted right here for SSO setup. Self-service password reset setup. I have it configured based on the group that Andra's in. I want her to use self-service password reset, and the first time she tries to access the system, I prompt her and force her to go in and set this up. So we're going to go through and we're going to configure self-service password reset real quick for Andra. Very, very painless process. Takes a couple of minutes to set up. Now you can define this based on your user set. If you're in the K-12 space and you've got kindergartners, we're obviously not going to be doing this with kindergartners. So we could put in a mix of questions that they already know or something along those lines to allow the teachers to help them reset. Whereas high school students, maybe we want to allow them to do self-service password reset. You can configure the rules on the back end. I have it very, very liberal where it only requires one option below, but you could have multiples in here. We're going to set up an authentication phone here real quick. And we're going to use my cell phone. We'll have it text me. So you have the ability to do text calls. You can do a third-party email. You can do question and answer, etc. So you have multiple options available to you for the two-factor authentication. So I received the text message. We're going to go ahead and put in the code, verify the code, and assuming I can type, we'll be able to move forward. There we go. Let's take a look. And while we're waiting for that, we're going to pop this back up here. Bear with me one second. So as we can see, we were able to get Andra logged in. We've got the authentication taken care of. And now we're going to go ahead and access her mailbox. So without any intervention on my part, by simply entering her into the database, new student comes in, new faculty member comes in, we have 0-day access. We're not having to go through and fire up an email and send it over to somebody in the IT department to get things set up. This is all happening dynamically in the background, and as soon as we enter the system, we're automatically provisioning these accounts out and getting them going. So day one, I'm able to log in, access my email, etc. Now I've decided that I'm going to bring in an iPad to work. So let me fire up my reflector here, and we're going to take a look at that. And AirPlay. Awesome. So we've got my iPad here. I need to do some work. I need to be able to access my email, etc. In all your major app stores, iOS, Android, Windows, etc., there is an app called Company Portal. So the Company Portal app, you'll be able to download ahead of time or on the fly and be able to access and enroll your device in the environment. So we have a couple of different options available to us. You've obviously got fully managed, right? Those are going to be your desktops, laptops, etc. And those are typically domain joined machines. They've got access to everything based on the credential of the user that's logged into them. Then you've got completely unmanaged. Those are your typical iPads, Androids, user-based devices. This provides a happy medium where you can do device enrollment, policy enforcement, device management on these MDM devices or on these BYOD devices. So we're going to go ahead and sign in with Andre's account here. Bear with me one second. Let's pull this up here. So what happens after I type in the email address and click down, Homeroom Discovery kicks off. In the back end, it says, hey, we are not Microsoft. We, Azure Active Directory, is not responsible for authentication for this individual user. That's where the Azure synchronization comes in. We're going to route you over to the ADFS server so that you can authenticate against your local Active Directory. This is the page you see up, and that was the step that we essentially skipped whenever we did the login via the web page. Now, you can see my super secure password thanks to the iPad. Don't write that down. So it's going to go through, authenticate me against the on-premise Active Directory, return a token back, and allow me access to the system. Now, the first thing that's going to happen after we authenticate is it's going to pop up and say, hey, would you like to go ahead and enroll this device? Now, these screens are customizable. You can put whatever information on here around device compliance and enrollment that you'd like. You can skip the setup and still access, and let's see, let me move it. In the background, you can see the company apps up here. This is still accessible if I skip it, but I may not be able to access certain bits of data. But for the purposes of this demo, we're going to go ahead and we're going to kick off an enrollment. It's going to give me a little bit of information. You know, when I'm enrolled, I'll be able to do X, Y, Z. So I'm going to get additional benefits by enrolling. Here are the privacy settings. You know, I can't look through your camera, etc. So this is a standard fare, but you do have the ability to customize the privacy. And we're going to go through and click enroll. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to install a management profile on this iPad, and we're going to set up a trust between this iPad and the remote management source, which is going to be Entune in this particular instance. So we're going to go ahead and let that start through its process. That'll take a minute or two. And while it's going, and I'll bring it back over and show you as things start happening. But we're going to jump over real quick, and we're going to look at the Entune side of it. So what does the back end look like while this is happening here? So this is the Entune Dashboard. And what we're going to see on the Entune Dashboard is we've got a huge selection of options available to us, different things that are going to happen. And I want to point out all of the policies that we're getting ready. Let's re-authenticate here real quick. All of the policies that we're getting ready to look at and see forced down, and we're getting ready to see a management profile installed on this device. But all of that is driven based off of group memberships that were created in the on-premise Active Directory. So while we're waiting for that re-authentication, let's take a look here. On my iPad, you can see it's prompted me to do a profile install. It tells me who the profile is. It's Forsyte IT Solutions. Give me some basic information on it. I can click here and I can get more details on it if I wanted to. You know, what are the enrollment challenges, assigning certificates, etc. So let's go ahead and kick off that install. Yes, want to install the profile. It's going to generate encryption keys so that it can encrypt data on the device. I'm just going to exchange those keys, and then we'll be off to the races. So again, while we're waiting for this to happen, let's take a look here. I was trying to show you the groups. So we've got various groups here. Here's demo users. This is a group that we saw as part of our demo, right? This was one of the groups that I had put Andre's account in. So when we look at demo users, I can see the total number of users in the group. I get my description on it, when it was updated. And if I click at the users here, there's Andre's account. And these were the other users that were in that group. These are the devices that they have assigned to them. We obviously see Andre doesn't have a device yet because it's not quite enrolled. All of her behavior is driven off of that. The MAM policies that we push down, the applications that she's going to get are all controlled by that single group access that we provisioned automatically based on her role in our system. So Andre's device is enrolled. It's reloading company portal now with the enrolled device, but we'll go through and start looking at some of the functions that are happening on the iPad, and then we're going to continue to dig through the Entune components. So on the iPad now, what we're going to do is hop over here, and we're going to look at the management profile. We can see under General, I've got management profiles down here. Device management, here's my management profile. This is what's being pulled down to my system right now. Some of the details won't be in here yet because it's being streamed down as we speak. But we're going to see these are the mobile management certificates, the signing certificate, and we just saw one pop in. That's because they're being pulled down actively. So while that's happening, you can see I'm being prompted for application install. In this particular instance, it's a Salesforce app. The user is going to be prompted throughout the process to go through and do installs. Here's a management pop-up. So I already had Word installed on the iPad. There is a MAM policy attached via Entune, and now it's giving me telling me that this is going to become a managed application, and so I'm going to allow that to be managed. So the beauty of this is it works even if it's pre-installed. If they've already loaded some of the applications and they're managed apps, it'll integrate with that. We can also see here, I've got a cliplet for password reset that we're going to take advantage of in a few minutes, and you can see the other various applications. I've got a cliplet for my help desk, Storm, Salesforce, and other applications that are being streamed down as part of that profile. So while those are streaming down, let's take a look at the actual Entune policies behind it. So we've got our groups here, obviously. I've got a couple of various groups. I've got an internal users group, and I've got a demo users group. I can go through the groups component, and I can pull out various devices in my environment. So if you have, you want to know how many iOS devices you have in your environment, you can click on that, and you can come through and you can see the iOS devices that are enrolled in the environment, and my iPad will show up in here shortly. I can see ungrouped devices. I can see, all my mobile devices, computers that we have. It gives you a very robust view of all of the devices in your environment, what their names are, what their statuses are, etc. I can go through and I can push updates down. If you're managing PCs through this, you have the ability to hook into Windows Update Service or SCCM and pull down updates. These would be critical updates, security updates, custom, so non-Microsoft updates. If you've got an Adobe package that you need to push out, you can package that up, you can upload it, and you can use Entune to push those out for you. Protection components, we've got an anti-malware component in here. If there's any malware in the environment, it'll turn up in this particular section. You can see the devices in here are clean. Alerts, this is going to give me various alerts across the environment. The ability to look at endpoint protection, policies, notifications. There's a ton of various options in here. Applications, this is something that we talk about on a pretty regular basis. So I can take a look easily and see what the detected software is across my environment. I can see, where it's installed at, what category it falls under, etc. This is a very useful feature if you want to see if your students have Candy Crush or something else running on their environment. And we also have the ability to push applications. So we spoke a little bit about MAM. One of the catches with MAM is that it has to be a managed application. Typically, all of the Microsoft applications are managed applications. They have that capability built into them. They also have those MAM policies associated with them. We'll be able to control that through the policies node here, but we can push them out directly through our application here. So you can see the apps that we have configured. These are iOS store apps. These are coming straight out of the store. These would be web apps or web clips in iOS speak. And I can click on a particular application, and I can see the deployment of that app. So let's look at the password reset for a second and go to Manage Deployment here. Again, it goes back to groups. So these are the groups of users that I'm managing it for. Here's my demo users. And if we look at the deployment action on those users, I have made it available to everyone, but I'm not forcing it down. But if you're a member of demo users, it's a required install, and we push it down as soon as possible. So all of my demo users are automatically going to get this pushed down. In an education environment, maybe you've got a group for students or groups of students. If they're in a particular group or class, biology, chemistry, etc. Maybe they've got to have specific applications that are applicable to that class. You could have a group and force down those applications to that specific set of users based on a group that we calculate dynamically. Licenses. So we've got a ton of different licenses available. These would be the various policies in here. Conditional access. This is something that we can get into a little more, and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try and speed up. We've only got 15 minutes, and we've still got a lot of ground to cover. But conditional access is important. You can set up conditional access policies and define access based on a set of criteria. If I'm connecting from an unmanaged device, I don't get access. If I enroll the device, I get a specific level of access. If I'm on a corporate managed device, I get full access. If I'm on an iPad, I get quarantined when I join up and connect my email, whereas on a computer that doesn't happen. Just some examples of the various access levels. So back to the iPad, let's take a quick look here and see what's happened. We can see all the various applications that have been installed here. I want to go through and I want to show you. So I just got prompted for a password. Why did that happen? Well, let's take a look. We're entering the password for our Exchange account, Forsyte IT Solutions email. This is the password so that it can configure and connect to Office 365 so that we can pull the email for Andre's new account. So we configure this, hit OK once, and it's off to the races. In the background, it's going to go ahead and configure the email account for her using the default web client in this particular case, and I'll be able to access email as soon as this is done in a typical scenario. In this particular case, because we have conditional access configured, I'm going to get an email in here that basically says, hey, your device has been quarantined. You're going to have to wait till till it's been moved out of quarantine. That's what we see here. Because we have conditional access configured specifically for iOS devices. Once her account gets moved out of quarantine, the iPad will be able to receive email. That is completely up to you whether you want to configure that or not. So now we're going to take a look at self-service password reset. We're going to do this straight from the iPad using the cliplet that I pushed down. Essentially, this takes me out to the self-service password reset portal on the Microsoft site, and we're going to take advantage of the web components here. So this doesn't require anything special on premise. The only thing I have the only on-premise component I have is Azure AD Connect, and that's dual purpose. I'm using that to synchronize my accounts between Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. So we're going to go ahead and type in Andre's account here. And we're going to hit the CAPTCHA here. And hopefully, I have a difficult time with CAPTCHA sometimes. We're going to try and do this right the first time. So what's going to happen in the background, A, is going to verify the CAPTCHA. B, it's going to go and check Andre's Active Directory or Azure Active Directory account and validate that we have self-service password reset enabled for her account. We obviously know that we do because we went through the registration for it. After that validation happens, I'm given two prompts here. I'll zoom in and take a look. I have the ability to reset my password by itself through the I forgot my password link, or I have the ability to unlock my account. If my account's been locked for some reason and I want to unlock it, and as opposed to firing up a help desk ticket, I could do that through the second option there. We're going to go ahead and do a password reset. So now we're kicking in the two-factor authentication. This is the stuff that we had registered for initially. Put my phone number in here, and we're going to have it text me. We could just as easily have had it called us. So once I get the text message, we'll be able to go in and do the validation. So I get the text message here. We'll put in the code. 74082. Next. Now I'm given the opportunity to reset my password. Now, a couple of things happen here. First, you got to enter your password twice. I'm going to use, again, another super secret password. And then we're going to hit finish. Now what's going to happen is that password is going to be hashed and encrypted. The web service is going to utilize the existing connection from Azure Active Directory Connect. It's going to communicate with your on-premise AAD Connect server. That AAD Connect server is going to communicate with the domain controller, validate that Andra has the ability to reset her password based on your password policies, and that password meets those complexity requirements. If it doesn't, I'll be given a response back directly on this page. I'll be notified. I can click it and communicate with the help desk. In this particular instance, it meets the criteria, and my on-premise Active Directory password has been reset to what I just set it to. It's that quick. No need to pick up the phone and call the help desk. This can be done from any device anywhere. So very, very simple way to save your staff time, to save your system money by implementing self-service password reset. So now we're going to close up the iPad. We've got 9 minutes left. I'm going to do a demo on the self-service password reset components, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So let me go ahead and close out the iPad here. So in my particular instance, we're going to do SSO with Salesforce. The reason I use Salesforce is because they're the only vendor out there that will give me an unlimited demo. I've tried multiple other vendors, and I've been hard-pressed to find somebody that will give me a development tenant for an unlimited length of time. So we're going to go ahead and pop up our Salesforce tenant here. And first thing we notice is I'm being prompted again. Why am I being prompted? This is for multi-factor authentication specific to this application. So through my Azure Active Directory, I set up a specific multi-factor auth policy for anyone that accesses Salesforce. And so I'm getting prompted upon first authentication to take advantage of that. So what we see here is how do I want to authenticate. So in this particular instance, I'm going to do the mobile application. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but one of the options that you get with Azure Multi-Factor Auth is a application-based authentication. So we can do text messages, we can do phone calls. In this particular instance, we're going to use the app. So we're going to receive notifications from the app. We're going to go ahead and set up the app here. We'll hit setup. It's going to let me configure it. Let's do this. This is my daughter's iPhone, so forgive me. Hold on 1 second. Let's go to the Azure Authenticator application. We're going to add an account. That quick. We have the Azure Authenticator set up for Andra's account now. It's done. It's going to check the activation status. In just a second, I'll get a prompt here, and we'll be able to go through and authenticate using the application. The application allows you to do push notifications, all sorts of good stuff. Let's see. Oh, let's move to this side. Contact me. So in just a second, I'll get a pop-up here, and we'll be able to go ahead and authenticate. So do I want to approve sign-in? It gives me some information here. It gives me the account, who it's with. We can verify it. And then we'll go through and we get a prompt authentication approved. Now we've gone through and successfully validated it. It's going to go and do a second line of setup just in case we lose it. It's pulling that out of my Azure Active Directory account. And now I'm logged into Salesforce using single sign-on. So what just happened there? In the background, we accessed a third-party SaaS application utilizing Azure Active Directory as the bridge back to our on-premise Active Directory. So very, very slick solution. There are thousands of SaaS applications that you can tap into and utilize that type of functionality for, whether they be Dropbox, Khan Academy, etc. And we can show you that here in a little bit. We've got 6 minutes left. I'm going to show you one last thing, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So we're going to drop down. I want to show you the back end for that. So this is my Azure Active Directory, Forsyte IT Solutions here. I'm going to expand this out. You can see when the dashboard pulls up, I've got my users, groups, etc. In this particular case, we're looking at applications. And when we go down the list here, I've got Khan Academy set up. I've got other various applications. The one that we just looked at specifically was Salesforce. Let's dig into this real quick. I've got the ability to configure single sign-on, which is what we just saw. I've also got the ability to configure provisioning. I didn't touch Salesforce, right? That happened automatically. And we did that through provisioning in Azure Active Directory. And then I've got the ability to assign accounts. This uses group-based single sign-on and allows me to pick groups. And again, here's my demo users group. And I can define who this gets assigned and what license they get assigned. Very, very important concept here. So you can go through and create groups and drive policies throughout your environment using group management. I can define what attributes are flowing and a whole host of other things. Let's take one step back. One other thing I want to touch on. What kind of applications can we perform SSO for? Virtually anything. I can add applications that you're developing. So if you're writing custom apps, you can take advantage of Azure Active Directory for that. You can use a gallery app, which we'll look at in just a second, or you can publish applications that will need to be accessible from inside or outside of your network. Let me give you an example. If you've got an on-premise application and you need to open it up to external access, maybe it's another school or something, and you don't want to open a bunch of ports, there is an application proxy that comes with Azure Active Directory that will allow you to use the Azure Active Directory authentication components and access that on-premise application. Real quick, here's a look at the applications that are available. Here's some of the education apps in here. As you can see, there's thousands and thousands of applications that you have access to. Canvas is a big one I see in there. Khan Academy's in here. You've got all sorts of stuff that you can take advantage of. Something to think about. As opposed to standing up multiple federation technologies, as opposed to going out and having 4 different solutions for that, you could take advantage of ADFS. You could take advantage of Azure Active Directory Premium and provide SSO to your entire organization very, very quickly and easily. 3 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. I can keep doing this for hours. Do we have any questions? Anything along those lines? Bear with me 1 second. We're going to open it up here. All right. If you have any questions, please hit the Ask button. It looks like a little hand. Raise your hand, and I'd be happy to answer them or talk to them. So we had a question around FastTrack funding. The FastTrack funding is, to the best of my knowledge, and Dave may be able to speak to this a little more, but the FastTrack funding is available till the end of the year. I don't know if it'll continue past that, but we do have a lot of customers, particularly in education, taking advantage of that. Any other questions? One second.
See.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Can you hear us, Jonathan?
So I was going to volunteer, Chris, if you can hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I know Chris or Jonathan had a question, but you know, you may want to also highlight where our customers or potential customers can also sign up for Entune or the EMS trial, so they can get a 30-day trial. Great place to really go and play with it. You know, perhaps even with Forsyte's help along the way in terms of trying to figure out what are the right workloads, what are the things you should be looking at, how would it fit specifically into your environment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important thing. If you go out to the EMS site, and I'll have to get you the specific link. I don't know if off the top of my head, but I'm going to go ahead and send it out to the list of attendees along with a link to the recording and the presentation as well. Do you have the link off the top of your head, Dave? We can put it in the chat window maybe?
It's in the chat window right now.
There you go.
So you can sign up today. It's good for 30 days. We can get it extended. Beyond that, also Forsyte can actually spend a chunk of a day actually helping you configure that and deploy that. They've worked with us across a wide range of educational institutions, educational healthcare institutions. So hopefully that'll be specific. So there's a question: do you know if FastTrack funding is available if we already have our users in AD? Or does that funding just available for getting user accounts created? So I can talk to that. I think, Chris, if you want a slide you can bring up, I believe I provided you a copy of that. So FastTrack funding deployment offer, there's two different pieces that you'll find. The FastTrack funding deployment offer actually will be for anyone that has purchased the Enterprise Mobility Suite, right? So that's a specific SKU. Thanks, that's the one. You'll need to remove Jonathan's question panel.
Oh,
because it's blocking it. It's over sitting the thing you just put up.
I can't see that.
Well, it's
we will try.
Doesn't matter.
Yep. Sorry.
So at the end of the day, you needed to buy the Enterprise Mobility SKU. So if you just bought AADP, or if you just bought MFA, or if you just bought Entune, you would not qualify for that offer. So if you purchased on or after October 1 of 2015, that offer would qualify with a minimum of 150 seats. And then you would have up to 1 year from the date of purchase in order to use that deployment offer. Beyond that, we also have something, and again, great Microsoft nomenclature, we also have something called the FastTrack Center, which can also help walk people through a configuration process, but it's a very light compared to what we can do from the deployment offer standpoint, where Forsyte or a similar partner is working very closely with you. Hopefully that helps. Jonathan, did that answer your question? You bet. So the next question you might ask is, can I still qualify for it because I bought it a year ago and maybe we have Azure AD up and running for our Office 365 instance and you have a renewal coming up? As a matter of fact, you can. So great question, Jonathan. I knew that was just the next question you wanted to ask. So say you bought AADP last year on your campus agreement. You then have a renewal or something coming in June and you would like to move to the Enterprise Mobility Suite because it offers such additional functionality. As a net new purchase from a standalone SKU, you would most likely qualify for that deployment offer as well if you were to purchase it in that manner. Okay? So thank you. Any other questions? I'm getting an instant an IM. So Chris, how would we get a hold of you in terms of if we wanted to engage with you?
Absolutely. So you can contact me directly at chris.irwin@forsyteit.com. You can reach out our website at forsyteit.com, or you can send an email to sales@forsyteit.com. I'm going to put that in the window as well, so you've got all of that. And we'll be following up again with all the registrants with additional information, a link to the recorded session, as well as the deck, etc. Any other questions? Excellent. Well, I appreciate it, guys. I know we went a couple of minutes over. Thanks for staying around. We're going to go ahead and end the recording session now. Please feel free to reach out to me or Forsyte about any of the technologies. We particularly specialize in the identity stuff. It's been a long time doing identity prior to this, and be happy to help you out with anything we've discussed today and then some.